for those who don't know, Hasan Piker is essentially an entertainer, a commentator. He is what's known as a streamer, a live streamer. So for those who don't know what that is, basically, just like we are on YouTube right now, we're streaming on YouTube in addition to being on the radio as a radio show. These guys go on the internet and they live stream themselves with video, or sometimes they stream their playing of video games, things like that. Hasan Piker kind of started off doing more of that and then grew into this far left commentator. He would often just go on the air to comment on events and promote communism and analyze news and things like that, not as part of any network necessarily, just as himself seemingly. And what it turns out is that go ahead.
Before that, though, I will say he started out. The reason he became so popular in part was because he built up a brand when he worked for the Young Turks. Because his uncle is Cenk Uygur, and so there's some sort of history there. If you want something to watch on election night, the Young Turks and watching them melt down is like a kind of a great source of pleasure. But in any case, so that's why he got his history. Then he went onto this website called Twitch and became such a popular streamer amongst the far left.
Yes, and part of that is because he often simply delivers these silly, trite defenses, so to speak, of communism, and this is why we need to, eat the rich or whatever like that. Meanwhile, he's making tons and tons and tons and tons of money live streaming, because that's what happens. People subscribe and give you money directly and that sort of thing. So there's plenty of hypocrisy there, as usual, with communists and this sort of thing. But in any case, he was mostly known just as this sort of political commentator and agitator, really. He's just there on the sidelines doing this. Well, it turns out that his connections may be even more nefarious, because he's, as you might expect from a communist, he's not very bright. Now, some communists are very intelligent, very cunning. He is not, because he went on a live stream and just started blabbing and complaining, of course. Woe is me that they're investigating me for these alleged connections with communist China and with propaganda in Cuba and so forth. And he basically reveals that this tech tycoon, Neville Roy Singham, this Marxist, has been a key financial supporter of leftist political advocacy and movements in the United States, as the National Pulse is reporting here. So he essentially rats out a bunch of his fellow communists and how they're basically all part of a network. They're all funded by these foreign entities. They're not just, dumb Americans who are out here, doing dumb communist things. They're actually all funded together. So he may have basically exposed a bunch of his fellow communists just because he wanted to go on the air and whine about his troubles.
Well, isn't that something, though? Imagine you get, subpoenaed in a case because of your foreign entanglements and your perhaps support of Cuba, which is a Marxist regime. And then you go online to stream. Like, does he not have a lawyer? You go online and you're like, not only am I going to continue streaming every day, but also I'm going to speak specifically about my case.
Yeah.
And so he was opining that he thought that what the DOJ was really looking for was this Shanghai-based billionaire. Maybe they weren't, which was hilarious. Maybe they were actually just looking at him because he went to Cuba and did these different filming that encourages the Cuban state, which is kind of a semi-enemy state, especially right now.
Exactly.
But in any case. So he goes on and he's talking about this major Shanghai-based billionaire and starts just naming basically all of his friends. And my goodness, I'm glad that I'm not one of his friends.
I know.
Because it's like, you wouldn't want to get close to him. So he's like naming these groups like Code Pink, which is this major far-left feminist group that's opposed to the United States having a military for reasons that they can't really articulate, and so... it really is kind of it's an amusing thing, but it's also like he's supposed to be this sort of, I don't know, to the degree that this is possible, like the intellectual hierarchy of leftist commentary right now.
Yeah, at least here in the United States.
Yeah,
he's regarded as one of these figures that you're going to have on shows to opine on the communist position, the far left position, the young rising up, against the evil. Whatever have you. He's clearly not that good of an example because he's just out here dropping all this. Now, it does say that the Department of Homeland Security and the War Department announced earlier this month that they've been expanding their investigations into Singham's activities. So it's not like he was off the radar, but as you say, it's entirely possible that maybe he's revealed some connections here that people hadn't even made yet regarding all of these groups. I mean, if you've got this group like Code Pink, which is out here saying, oh, the U.S. shouldn't have a military, well, maybe you think, oh, well, they're just doing that because they're kind of dumb and they're these peaceniks, who want no military power type of thing. Oh, or maybe they don't want the U.S. to have a military because they are being paid by China to try and disrupt American, support for the military and things like that. Suddenly, that makes a lot more sense. Suddenly, those reasons they can't explain become a lot clearer, that this is why they want to, promote these ideas. Same for the Party for Socialism and Liberation, with protests against U.S. foreign policy and such. So I think this is, again, on the surface. Go ahead.
It's also interesting that, if he himself is promoted by Singham, which he didn't explicitly say, but it kind of does seem that way, well, then you have to, it calls into question some of his more controversial takes, such as his take that America deserved 9/11, such as his take that Charlie Kirk deserved his assassination. He was rather infamous for saying that. I think his stream was suspended briefly. Directly after that. So some of these, I'm just going to call them calls to violence.
Yes.
Even if they occurred after the fact, it's still like an encouragement of violence when you say that violent thing should have happened. Those things, I think, get looked at a little bit differently when you wonder, well, where is the funding coming from? Like, it's one thing if you've got a Marxist agitator who is being funded by thousands of different little miniature Marxists who are living with their parents. Like, that's kind of, it's one thing. But it's a different thing when the Marxist agitator is actually being paid by a foreign nation to undermine and to perhaps commit or to encourage perhaps acts of violence. It's a very different question.
That's why I called him an agitator, not just, he's often described simply as a far left commentator, things like that. Or, oh, well, he's just a video game streamer. He's just one of those dumb video game streamers. He doesn't matter in that sense. Of course, all the kids think something stupid, because kids are stupid, right? Well, turns out there might be a lot more behind this, and we should be aware of this. We should know this, because communism is alive and well. It didn't collapse when the Berlin Wall fell. It's still out there, and it's still funding people like this who are calling for violence. So something to be aware of. This is a development we'll keep track of as hopefully these investigations continue and we see some real concrete results, not just for Hasan, but for all of his buddies that he apparently has been fine exposing on a live stream because he can't keep his mouth shut. So very impressive.
If you remember, we covered a few weeks ago, I think we covered it very briefly, but the Department of Justice is also looking into Act Blue, which is a major funder of Democrat campaigns, and there's some sort of nefarious thing going on there as well, allegedly. And so when you put it together, I mean, it's always a question of, are we split? Like, is America roughly split 50-50 between Democrat and Republican? Maybe yes, maybe no. And then you've got, well, okay, but if massive media campaigns are being funded by other countries, what does that mean for the voter bloc in the United States? And remember the whole Russia collusion hoax, right? All of that was based upon this sort of pretext that, well, a foreign national can't spend money in American elections because it's fundamentally unfair and fundamentally disturbing to the American ethos of the republic that we're supposed to have. And that ended up being really an overblown, overhyped thing. But now what we're looking at is these influencers from countries more like China that are sort of, I guess you could say, in a more roundabout way, because they're going through different political organizations, changing the messaging that is reaching especially young people.
Yes, especially young people, and just the activity to spread propaganda, to agitate, to wind people up. Again, that has an effect. It has an effect on voting. It has an effect on these election results. So it is important to investigate. And the DOJ has seemed to be slow rolling a lot of that over the first couple of years of this administration. Seems like things might be picking up now. So hopefully these continue and we see some real results.